The bucket strategy, otherwise known as time segmented investing. Let's break it down on this episode of the Hawaii Retirement Show. All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Hawaii Retirement Show. Today we're talking about the bucket strategy, otherwise known as time segmented investing. And this is another distribution strategy. Previously, on a couple episodes back there, I talked about the 4% rule. And this is falls in the same category of a form of distribution strategy for your retirement assets in retirement. And what this strategy is all about, the bucket strategy, is it's just like it says in the title here. You want to bucket out different portions of funds for different time periods, okay? And we'll get into all that, what the bucket strategy really is, and some limitations and concerns I have around it, but also some positives that come away from the bucket strategy. So again, this is all focused around retirement income planning, okay? That's the whole goal of this 4% rule and this bucket strategy. And you know, it's not my favorite approach to bucket strategy, but like I said, there are some kind of conceptual merits to it and some things that I think are valuable in how it approaches retirement income spending. So what is the bucket strategy? So it's a time segmented investing approach, right? It breaks it down. Now there's 2-bucket strategy. There's a 3-bucket strategy. I'm sure some people have variations of it where you have 4 buckets, 5 buckets. I can't see it get too far beyond that because then it just gets a little out of control, but I'm sure somebody has a ton of buckets out there, right? And so, for example, like a 2-bucket strategy, in bucket 1, you would put cash or very low volatility liquid investments for near-term expenses, right? So maybe it's CDs or whatever it might be, right? That's bucket 1. And you set aside that money with the idea you're going to use it in maybe 1 to 2 years. So the second bucket in a 2-bucket strategy would be like a balanced investment portfolio for long-term growth, right? So this is maybe earmarked for, you know, long-term, 5+ years or something like that. There's all different ways to break it down. There's no like one right or wrong. Like I see a common one is like a 3-bucket strategy where you have, you know, bucket 1 is your liquid reserves, 1 to 2 years. Then you have this intermediate bucket that's bucket 2 of 5 to 8 years. And that's usually comprised of, you know, high quality fixed income stuff like bonds and treasuries. And then you have bucket 3 in a 3-bucket strategy, which is like long-term growth, right? Equity heavy, a lot of stocks, and it's earmarked for weathering the storm, long-term growth. You know, it can withstand a lot of the volatility, and that's like 10+ years, right? So as you can see, the bucket strategy, the reason it's sometimes referred to as time segmented investing is because you bucket out for the purpose of different time periods, right? And that way, you know, by doing that, you essentially move money around so that way when you need the money, you take it out of the bucket that is low volatility, you know, liquid, and usable, right? And then your long term is earmarked to withstand the ups and downs of the markets. You know, so the way I look at it is time segmenting is interesting, and I think there's a lot of limitations to that. Where I find value in the bucket strategy is purpose segmenting. Right. And what I mean by that is a lot of times I myself, when I'm working with people, might find it's a good idea to bucket out funds that are earmarked for long-term care, aging expenses, health expenses that we know we're not going to be kind of pulling distributions from and use as an income. And also, we hopefully have a very long time horizon on these funds. So we bucket it out for this purpose. And by doing that, we can invest it a little differently than we would, you know, the rest of our portfolio, if it's, you know, a distribution portfolio or whatever else it is. Okay, so I like purpose-driven bucketing at times, right? And that kind of goes into, you know, sometimes the best approach to this distribution planning and retirement income planning is kind of a mix of several different distribution strategies and blending them together, taking the best of each one, or whichever part of each one works best for you, right? Because everybody's situation is different. And just figuring out what works for you, what you like. Some people love the bucket strategy, and more power to them. You got to find what works for you. Some limitations and concerns I have around the bucket strategy is the rebalancing challenges. And this is where the bucket strategy, like the 4% rule, was based off this paper, right? And so we can kind of derive a lot of hard facts about it, even though there's a ton of nuance in how people implement it. With the bucket strategy, I haven't come across like a definitive white paper that outlines how this is supposed to work. There's a lot of varying opinions. But the rebalancing seems like a challenge, right? Because if you're pulling out of bucket one, which is your liquid cash, and similar type of low risk investments there, and then the market is down, in my opinion, you'd want to rebalance to where you're going to put money from your bonds, your treasuries, your fixed income, and you're going to buy those equities, that stocks, the higher volatility stuff when it's down, and rebalance and essentially buy low, sell high, right? The rebalancing challenges of the bucket strategy are definitely a consideration. I could make an argument that if you could look at your portfolio as time segmented by how much bonds you have in your portfolio, instead of actually bucketing it out, right? How much bonds, treasuries, fixed income, and you could look at that, like how much time period would that cover, right? And that's kind of how you could look at it. And it would simplify things for the rebalancing, because when you start bucketing things out, when are you pouring from each bucket into the other, and is it really the opportune time to do so, right? There's just a lot of questions I have around that. And then with that, it doesn't bode well to flexibility with market shifts and changes. I mean, for that same purpose as the rebalancing. But I like purpose driven bucketing. I think there's really something to that, and also I like an integrated blend of maybe the 4% rule, the bucket strategy, and a dynamic withdrawal strategy, right? Now, when you hear time segmented investing, sometimes it goes hand in hand with this bucket strategy. The other way you could look at it is things like bond ladders or TIPS ladders, or multi-year guaranteed annuities, MYGAs. And that's a form of time segmented investing that doesn't necessarily have to be a part of a bucket strategy, right? And again, that's where we kind of go into all this stuff kind of blends together in some form for most people. And so some people might use time segmented investing in some sort of bonds or TIPS ladder, but not actually implement a all-out bucket strategy for their entire retirement income distribution, plan. But you hear them interchangeably sometimes, bucket strategy, time segmented investing, but time segmented investing can also be used, I feel like, in other areas as well. One thing to look at, the whole point of this whole figuring out a good distribution strategy for retirement income is really you're trying to minimize sequence of return risk, right? You're trying not to pull out money in down markets early in retirement that's going to impact your portfolio for the rest of retirement, right? You're trying to mitigate that risk the best you can. All the while, the second part of it is you don't want to run out of money, right? For most people. Most people have a nest egg, and they want, some people have a nest egg large enough where they're just not going to run out of money, right? But for most people, a challenge of retirement income distribution planning is sequence of return risk and not running out of money, right? We don't want to get to age 80 and find out we've been taking out too much and our portfolio took too many hits because of down markets early on, and now we're running out of money, right? And so that's all what this is about. Now, I'm hesitant to even go into this direction because I'm not completely against annuities. They have a time and place, and they are a tool. The reason I'm hesitant is because most of them are oversold It's a complicated product, and it's sold by a lot of times agents who don't really understand the product in depth themselves, and they are what I would call financial salesmen, not financial advisors. That's a conversation for another time. But at its core, an annuity, a single premium immediate annuity, deferred income annuities, right? These are income annuities. It can help solve that longevity risk when used correctly, right? Now, this isn't an endorsement to go out and just put all your money into a income annuity, right, to solve longevity risk, because when you do that, you're also it's a definitive decision, right? Once you go into these income annuities, that's it. There's no turning back on it. And also, you're giving up growth, right? You're giving up growth in return for simplicity, right? You don't have to manage these assets anymore. Look at your portfolio. It's going to be a monthly check. And stability, right? And longevity risk. It's going to come in for as long as I live. As long as, and this is the thing here, they come in all different types, all different flavors. As long as you're looking at the right one with the right, annuitization benefit, and there's all different kinds of those. But I just wanted to point out that annuity, some of them can solve the second problem of longevity risk. And I guess it can solve the sequence of return risk as well, though I wouldn't advise to go, dump all of your assets into these income annuities, because again, you're giving up growth in exchange for stability, which not necessarily a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing, right? Talk to a financial advisor, one who doesn't just live in the insurance world, because those who live in just this insurance world, they're going to look at things a little different than somebody who's fee only. And fee only, they still can charge an AUM fee, or it might be a flat fee, but they're not going to be collecting commissions off of these annuities or other insurance products, right? So it's good to get a couple different opinions on those. All right, so that's the bucket strategy, time segmented investing. I just want to close it with, there's no perfect strategy out there, withdrawal strategy. You got to figure out what works for you. Some people love the bucket strategy. It works for them. Some do-it-yourselfers out there, I think parts of it, conceptually work, right? Like I said, I like purpose-driven bucketing, not so much time segmented. But each approach comes with trade-offs, right? We had the 4% rule. We talked about, there's some value there, but the applicability of it, as a definitive distribution strategy, there's some limitations also, right? There's trade-offs to everything. And we'll do another episode on kind of a dynamic withdrawal strategy. Some people call it a guardrail strategy. There's a Vanguard version of it. I think Michael Kitsis has a version of it too. There's a couple different, and that's the other thing with all these, right? I'm kind of explaining it, but just understand that it comes in all different flavors, even the bucket strategy, 4% rule, and all these things. Every strategy is their strength and weakness. Figure out which one works for you, okay? It's all personal. It's all individually driven according to your circumstances and your personality, your wants, your needs. But yeah, I think that sums it up. All right, if there's anything you'd like me to talk about in the show going forward, email it over to aloha@hawaiiretirementshow.com, and we'll catch everyone on the next one.
The opinions and statements presented on this show are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations. Never make any investment or financial decisions based on information offered on this show without first consulting your financial, legal, or tax advisor. All economic and performance information mentioned on the show is historical in nature and is not indicative of any future results. All indices mentioned on this show are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. Lastly, all opinions expressed by Jason Cutitta and any guests on the show are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of or are endorsed by ToBA Financial. For Jason Cutitta, investment advisory services are offered through ToBA Financial LLC, a registered investment advisor offering advisory services in the state of Hawaii and in other jurisdictions where exempt from registration.